Welcome back. Great news. This is day 2 of your 7-figure real estate success plan. And we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday. If you did not listen to yesterday's podcast, we went over 5 points that you definitely want to go back and listen to. And obviously the podcast is available everywhere where you listen to podcasts, and it's available over on YouTube as well. So Julie, without any further delay, let's jump into point number 6. And part 2 is all about skills, systems, and scaling up. Point number
That's right.
6.
Point number 6, define what makes you different. We talked about this a little bit yesterday about why someone should choose you versus virtually any other type of agent, whether they're a commission cutter, a luxury agent, somebody who advertises a lot, their best friend, the guy they play golf with, doesn't matter. Why should they choose you versus somebody else? Now, you might also ask yourself why sometimes sellers choose the agent that overprices and undercommissions. It's because that's one way that they can differentiate agents who all sound the same. You can't sound like everyone else. Now, here's something that happens on coaching calls. We'll put you on the spot and say, what is a USP? And a lot of agents know what that is, a unique selling proposition. What makes you different? But when asked what makes you different, they tend to have the same answers. They'll either freeze completely because they don't have an answer, or they'll say, well, I know how to negotiate. I have a lot of buyers I work with. I do a lot of online advertising, whatever. You all sound the same. And that's why they go with the agent that's under commissioning and overpricing. Instead, you need to demonstrate what actually makes you different, things in the pre-listing package. That's what we're driving at. And not just because you say so, but because you can prove it, because you have evidence, and it is different than what everyone else is offering.
And that, at the end of the day, is one of the key elements of Premier Coaching. It's an ethical real estate professional. It's the pre-listing package. And what a pre-listing package really is, and we've designed one for you that can be personalized, and you can see it when you go to premiercoaching.com and just scroll down, you'll see it. Or when you go to our mastermind, we show the different pages. But the pre-listing pack is designed for you to give to a seller. And there's one for sellers, and then there's one for buyers. And then one for buyers is called pre-buyer appointment package. And so again, this is something that's designed to do all the selling really for you. So just sticking with sellers for a second, because that's definitely where our focus is if you're going on a listing appointment tonight and you fully pre-qualified that seller, you know what their motivation is, you know what their time frame is, you know what they think the house is worth, you know if you're competing with another agent, you have all the questions answered, and you send the pre-listing pack. And the pre-listing pack is going to answer the questions about, why should they hire you? What is your marketing plan? What is your internet marketing plan? What designations do you have? What's your commission rate? What's your communication guarantee? What's your all these things? And the pre-listing pack is designed, and when you see it, you'll be blown away. It's designed to make it so when the seller receives your pre-listing pack prior to your listing appointment, that when they go through the material, they won't go through all of it. They'll go through maybe 5 or 6 of the pages. But when they realize how different you are, if for no other reason than you actually send a pre-listing pack, if for no other reason than your pre-listing pack is, certifies you as, they'll see you're an ethical real estate professional agent because you're prior to Premier Coaching. But it's also removing all the questions that they don't want to actually have to confront you with when it comes to a listing appointment. And that's something you've got to get clear in your head. Seller doesn't want to haggle with you about commission, price, they don't want to haggle with you about, any of the numbers things. They want to have an easy solution to the problem that they have, which is choosing a listing agent for the job of selling your home. The pre-listing pack does all the work and essentially makes it so that when you show up at the house, assuming you follow our 7-step listing process, you show up on time, you follow the little procedures we give you when you get to the seller's house, you're going to take the listing, even if you're a brand new agent. Because why? You sent a very professional looking package that none of your competitors will have done. You've answered all the questions that they would have otherwise had for you, and you've answered them to their satisfaction.
Otherwise known as objections. When you say answered the questions, remember the definition of an objection is an unanswered question. So what would your life be like? How would you change? How much more confident would you be if you knew when you went to a listing presentation that all the objections were already handled for you, that 100%. They weren't laying in wait for you when you try and close and ask for that signature? You would actually feel like being a proactive lead generator, wouldn't you? It's a miraculous thing that happens when you know that you can win virtually every appointment.
And we did the same thing on the buyer side, because you have to now compete with the buyers for exclusives, right? And so we've created a similar, very impressive package for you to deliver to the buyers prior to the appointment. We don't want you being in a position where you have to, be sitting in the seller's house and haggling over commissions. If you're having conversations like that when you go on listing appointments, you have already lost the listing. You're going to end up overpricing it. You're going to end up taking the listing for lower than market rate commission, or you're not even going to take the listing. So if you're in a listing appointment and you think it's about going in there for an MMA match with the seller, you're already lost. It's the wrong mindset to have. That's not what they want. That's not what you want. So the pre-listing pack does the work for you. It is included with Premier Coaching. Just go to premiercoaching.com and you can enroll. And there's two ways you can enroll in Premier Coaching. And I'm going to strongly encourage you guys go with the VIP route, because it gives you all of Premier Coaching right when you enroll, including full access to Ethical Real Estate Professional. Otherwise, Premier Coaching is delivered monthly over 12 months, with Ethical Real Estate Professional being what you receive at the end. So go to premiercoaching.com and learn more about how you can take urgent action. Do this before you have a bunch of listing appointments set. And Julie just said something. I don't know if it clicked in your mind. So maybe you've been apprehensive to be a proactive lead generator. Maybe you've been apprehensive to go after expireds or for sale by owners, or really anything other than what falls in your lap. Well, if you have a pre-listing pack, which is going to do all the heavy lifting for you, which is going to do all the selling for you prior to actually getting to the house, doesn't that completely change your mindset about going after maybe some of the listings that you would have had to compete for before? Doesn't it make you feel like you have a superpower? Well, you will have a superpower, but you need to get the superpower. That's Premier Coaching. And that's, of course, being an ethical real estate professional and having the pre-listing packages that we've created for you. Premiercoaching.com. The link is down below. Julie Harris, next point. It is strange how your point number 7s are always my favorite point. Point number 7 is get into momentum and stay there.
That's right. Yesterday, we talked about the stages that come before momentum. That's doing the work, concentration. We talked about getting your real estate treasure map, which is the plan that helps you know what you're supposed to be doing. So point number 7 is to get into momentum by doing the work. Set those specific financial goals and go towards them. Understand your lead sources and work the lead sources. Build your ideal schedule and stick to it. Don't just have the treasure map. Do what it says to do in the treasure map. If you have outlined that to meet or exceed your goal, you need to have 5 active listings at all times, and you're sitting there with 1, you actually do know what to do. You need to get more listings. And by doing your treasure map, you will know what your lead sources are and how you're going to go about creating those listings. The more listings you have, the fewer buyers you have to work with. You can refer those buyers to your buyer referral partners, etc. But point number 7 is about doing the work and sticking to the plan. Well, some of you are great at creating a plan. You've got to do the plan.
It's doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level. And most of the things that have the greatest benefit in your life are the things that require you to keep in momentum for the longest periods of time, and the things that you want to do the least. Okay. I just delivered you guys a bunch of bad news, but it's true. So if you want to stay in good physical condition, you have to make sure you're doing that every day, not just now and then. And you don't just essentially take care of yourself when you have the sniffles, right? When you want to stay in have good financial momentum, you have to do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level every single day. There are days off here and there, but you have to consistently, when you've scheduled yourself to work, to actually work. Otherwise, you're going to lose the momentum. And it should be very obvious to you what I'm saying is true. But for example, if you you worked out for the past 5 months and you're in great shape, you lost your weight. Yeah, maybe you've done Ozempic. It doesn't matter. You're in peak physical condition and you just decide to take the summer off. By the time early fall rolls around again, you know as well as I do, you're going to be not just back where you started 5 months ago. You might even have gained more weight or be in less physical condition than you were before. So the older you get, this is definitely true, but the harder it is to stay in momentum, and the harder it is to rebuild the momentum if you stop. So the key is just never stop. That's just the bottom line.
It's actually easier to never stop.
Well, it is easier to never stop because it is such a nightmare to rebuild where you were. Like it's so true in everything in life, because everything goes so damn fast, right? Mm-hmm. Time goes fast, everything technologically changes fast. But if you lose like a week, I'll stick with the gym analogy. If you lose a week at the gym, it actually is going to take you maybe 2 weeks to get back to where you were, where you were prior to taking that week off. It's crazy. But
yeah, I had a piano teacher, many actually, that said, you miss 1 day of practice, actual practice, not just screwing around practice. You miss 1 day of serious practice, you have 2 to 3 days to make up for it. And I think having lived through that, that is absolutely true. Sometimes it's even worse than that. And you're right about working out. It's funny because whenever I'm in the boot camp with kettlebells on Monday, everybody says the same thing. Who made the 50-pound weight weigh 70 pounds today? How did that
100%.
happen? It's because you took the weekend off.
Yeah, 100%. I know. And then it's even worse too, because if you don't constantly, like, again, staying with the gym, if you don't increase the amount of weight that you're lifting, you don't have to go wacko, but if you don't increase the amount of weight you're lifting, your body kind of develops this complacency or goes into this, I don't know what the physical, I'm not a physiologist, but the same thing happens with spirituality. It happens with your relationships. It happens with your finances. So if you decide, okay, I've got this, 35-pound kettlebell mastered, or I've got my ability to stay at 10 listings at all the time mastered. And if you're not saying, well, now I need to have 12 listings at all times, or now I need to go to the 50-pound, you're going to, again, become complacent and you're going to lose momentum. I don't make the rules, guys. I live by them just as much as you do. And I don't necessarily like the rules in which we all have to play, but it is what it is. So it's better not to fight it and just to accept it. All right, Julie, let's go on to the next point. And the next point is, again, a fantastic point. Track everything with visual accountability. This is probably one of the things we get the most positive feedback about,
Oh, yeah.
So go ahead.
That's right. Track everything with visual accountability. We teach this in Premier Coaching using whiteboards where you track your leads, not just contacts, not contacts. Leads are people who you're actually talking to, who you're pre-qualifying, who you're using scripts with. You are tracking your average sale price. You're tracking your sources, where your leads are coming from. You're tracking your active, pending, and closed transactions so that you can say to your coach, to yourself, to your spouse, to your kids, are you on track, ahead, or behind? How are you going to know if you're not tracking it? You can track your progress towards your magic number. If you're supposed to have 5 active listings or 10 or 20, and you have half of that, now you know what you need to do. It takes the guesswork out. And I have to say, Tim, you are right. This is one of the things that we hear from coaching clients is literally life-changing. When they start having that visual accountability, this is beyond just putting it on a spreadsheet or jotting it down in a book. Using the whiteboards. I'll give you 3 examples just from this week from one-on-one coaching clients in our organization who have raised their goal this year because they see on their visual tracking, on their, their visual accountability, they can see that assuming that everything they have in the pipeline comes to fruition, again, not just contacts, people who are actually getting their financing, they're actually seeing properties, they're going on listing presentations, they have motivated sellers. Assuming that the quality is there that we think, they're actually far enough ahead. I have one client that raised her GCI goal from $1 million to $1.5 million this week. I have another one that said, I am positive I'm going to hit my goal of 400. I want to make it 500 this year. And I have another one in Los Angeles that her initial goal was 500. She's thinking about maybe pushing it up to $1 million. She knows that that's going to take a lot more proactive lead generation, a lot more organization. She's still building her skills. She's going to have to talk to more people. She's thinking about it, but I think she's going to do it. Now, how can you make those decisions if you don't know whether you're on track, ahead, or behind already? You can't.
Well, Julie, let me tell that story. So this was a client that we had when probably the first 3 or 4 years Julie and I were coaching full time, and she worked with her son, and they were very successful. They've had a really nice sale price. I think they're in California, one of these really, not super posh, but nice, desirable coastal type towns. And he said, and they came to us and they were stuck. I think it was 25 houses a year or something. It was stuck, right? And this was, their sale price was still over $1 million. And this was a while ago.
Not
and they
a
were
bad
stuck.
place to be stuck.
That's what I'm saying.
Stuck.
They're making really nice money. But he said he was working with her. He wanted to earn more money. He wanted to get her to, get her game back on and get her out of complacency, the whole thing. And so we started coaching him, and sure enough, the lady had killer skills, fantastic. Son was a natural born killer too, so he was going to do really well. But his mom still wouldn't produce more than she'd been producing. And we saw this happen over a series of months. And so what we did is obviously we had her put the dry erase boards on the wall, and she had a couple, one of the dry erase boards was the number of listings that she was supposed to have all times. And the other dry erase board was the number of closings that she was going to have that particular year. So she didn't have any visual accountability prior. So dry erase board on the wall, but we knew she'd sold every year around 25 houses. She knew how to do that on autopilot. She was complacent selling 25 houses and making really good money. Not a bad place to be, but there it is. And we get a lot of high-end coaching clients. Most of the coaching clients that Julie and I coach are just like that. They're at the very top of their game and they don't want to be complacent and they want to go to the next level. Maybe they want to, learn how to create more financial independence for themselves. Maybe they want to worry or think about how to expand their businesses, all kinds of different reasons. But this is an example. So then I had her do the dry erase board routine, put it up on her wall, and then I had her label the list or the closings board 1 through 50. That was it. That was the only change. And then she put the closings that she already had on the board. I think at the time the year was like half over. So she had 25 closings, sure enough. But now every time she walked into her office, she would see that was literally her goal. There was on her dry erase board 1 through 100 closings, 2000, whatever it was. And she only had 25. And it was, let's say, May, and she was supposed to have another 75. Well, she automatically started working harder. It was all subconscious. It was all basically manipulation of herself. She was doing it herself. And sure enough, they sold 100 houses that particular year. They didn't close all 100, but they sold them. So it was closed and pending over 100 just because of walking into her office. Whereas before she was, and she was the top agent in her office and she 25 every year, making over $1 million, and all of a sudden now it's not good enough because the dry erase board is saying, where the heck's my other closings, right? And on the listing side of things, the same thing. She wasn't carrying that many listings, like 10 listings. And so we did the math and we figured that for her to sell 100 houses, she'd have to have like 15 listings. So dry erase board listings was written on the top in permanent ink. And then we numbered it 1 through, I think I actually made her number 1 through 20. And guess what happened? She automatically started taking more listings, and that obviously led to more closings. That's what coaching and training is all about. And she didn't require a lot of skills. She required motivation and to reconstitute her belief into what she could actually do. And she had to acknowledge the fact that she was in complacency, and which she was, which all of us are at differing levels. But it's important that you acknowledge that complacency does not mean that you get to coast. Complacency actually means that you're losing momentum and you're going backwards. That's what complacency is. Complacency isn't just kicking your feet up, right? Complacency is the acceptance that you're slowly losing. That's really what a complacency truly is. All right, Julie, let's go on to our next point, which is point number 9, which is be relentless with the basics. What did you mean by that?
Yes, be relentless with the things that actually make you money in real estate. Some of the things you were just talking about with your example. There are a lot of things that are what you would call work theater. I love that term that you coined, work theater. Things that look like work, but won't necessarily lead to a paycheck. So what actually does lead to a paycheck in real estate? Well, the most important thing, as always, is proactive lead generation. Without that, none of the other things probably will even exist. So proactively lead generate. Then, of course, you have furiously fast lead follow-up. That's another very common thing that our coaching clients say changed their lives is the speed in which they follow up and or actually answering the phone in the first place.
Do you remember where we got that? Yeah. Do you remember you and I thought of that phrase, by the way?
Furiously fast lead follow-up?
Uh-huh. Do you remember where?
I remember, well, you tell me first.
No, you don't remember. So you want me to tell you, you want me to do your homework for you. We were in Georgetown in a sub shop in Georgetown, Texas. You do remember? Yeah. And their thing was furiously fast delivery or something.
We used to call it relentless lead follow-up. And then we saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't remember the name of the sub shop, but that was their theme was furiously fast delivery. Right.
Right.
And we used to be like, I don't know, maybe 3 miles away from this place. And somehow they really did, like, we could never figure out what route they were taking that we didn't know how to take. They would, like, you would hang up and like 5 minutes later, you'd have your subs delivered. I don't know what it was, but they actually were furiously fast.
But it really goes down to what impression upon, it's so funny, the psychology that most agents have, most underperforming agents, they think that if they're furiously fast with their lead follow-up, that the customer is going to perceive that they had nothing better to do and that somehow furiously fast lead follow-up is a negative, not a positive.
Makes them look desperate or something.
Exactly. Right? Where it's just that you hear low producing agents say that all the time, where the reality of it is any top producing agent knows that the number one job that they have is definitely furiously fast lead follow-up and then knowing how to pre-qualify. And if it's an existing customer, furiously fast lead follow-up is still equally as important because guess what then is going to happen? They're going to feel comfortable sending you leads, referrals, centers of influence, past client expansion, that type of thing. So furiously fast lead follow-up is so critically important. And if you just do that one thing, hey, think about this. How often do other agents follow up with you right away? Now imagine how crappy their experience, how crappy their potential buyer and sellers are. You will take listings and work with buyers just because you had furiously fast lead follow-up, just because you got at the seller's house 5 minutes early, just because you are professional and following a professional system. It is so easy to compete and win in real estate because so many of your competitors are so straight up unprofessional and not prepared at all for the realities of having to be competitive in a market like this. And it's just going to become more competitive, by the way.
Yeah, that's 100% true. In fact, I would say an agent that's great at furiously fast lead follow-up, almost like, a couple podcasts ago, we're talking about like having a theme that, excuse me, that you live by, that you always follow up very quickly. That's what you're known for. I would put an agent that does that, but is still learning their presentation skills. They'll probably still take the listing because they were like this on their follow-up, versus an agent that's worked really hard on their presentation, but sits on the lead too long. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Yes.
that's the ultimate problem with these mythical long-term lead follow-up CRM drip campaigns. You guys, I want you just to think about this logically, and we talk about this on almost every podcast because it's such a critical point. You should not have a crap ton of leads. That's not winning. That's losing, because what you're doing is you're not pre-qualifying those folks. And if you happen to have spent a lot of money and time building a CRM with a bunch of drips or a bunch of people in it that you're dripping on, stop, call all the people that are in that list and pre-qualify all of them. Use our scripts, and be not surprised at all when you discover that, more than half of your buyers that you have labeled as buyers and have been a buyer drip campaign actually have houses to sell. Approach every single one of your leads as if they're sellers. That's how you make a lot of money. And then pre-qualify them, ask the questions, find out what their motivation is. And if they're not motivated, if they're not going to transact with you, and, depending on your market cycle, 6 months or less, probably, you need to give yourself permission to not follow up with them at all. Because what happens, unfortunately, is the good leads are being covered up by all these unmotivated leads. Your job is to now go through all of your leads and find the ones that are going to transact with you. The best agents in the world are always the ones with the fewest number of leads, but the leads they have are the highest quality leads because they pre-qualified them. It's that simple. Great salespeople, which is what you should be striving to become, do not stockpile leads. That is a huge mistake. It is a recipe for absolute disaster because you're not calling them and doing the real work of real estate and using a script and pre-qualifying them. That is what you should be doing. Everything you're looking for is on the other side of that. Julie, point number 10, build your spokes on the wheel.
Yes. So what we're talking about is that there is no one magic lead source. I know all of you want there to be. I know you want that easy button on your desk where you just hit it and the world rains leads upon your head. That does not exist, even though everybody collectively wants it.
I'm going to actually argue with you on that point, because I think it does exist, but agents are expired for sale by owner, for rent by owner, notice of defaults, if that is relevant in your market.
Yes, but you've already proven the point that you need multiple spokes. You said FSBOs, expireds, and probate. Those are all.
But those are leads. Those are leads that are people who have their hands in the air and saying, yes, I want to sell my house. And like, for example, you guys know that we have as our preferred partner for expireds, RedX. And so RedX is the system that we strongly suggest all of you use. And they go and do the work of finding the phone numbers on the expired. So, and they'll go into your MLS, they'll find all the newest expireds in your marketplace. They then essentially load them into your RedX CRM, and then you use our scripts and you call the folks up and you proactively lead generation. You set pre-qualified listing appointments. That's basic system that does not cost you any money beyond the RedX subscription, which isn't very expensive. You need to do this urgently because the expired market is going to be happening the second half of this year for sure, because all the listings that are right now that are agents that are inexperienced, didn't know how to price them or position them on the market correctly, those listings are going to start expiring. Look in your MLS. How many houses have been in the MLS for more than 60 or 90 days? Those are all going to expire. You need to learn how to call those listings. Use RedX. Text the word RED to 47372. Text the word RED, RED to 47372, and we'll text you back a link. And with that link, you can join RedX for $150. You get a $150 discount. I'm going to give you guys a little pro tip here. When you're signing up, ask them to send you the old expireds as 6 months, 12 months. And then they'll scrub them and make sure they haven't been relisted, and call those first, because those are often the easiest to obviously prospect because they haven't received any sort of solicitations, either mail or phone, in months. And so when you call them, you're going to be shocked how easy some of them are to get on the phone and have a conversation that leads to you taking a listing. All right, Julie, let's go on to the last point. Listings are the engine, and that really should have maybe been the first point because it's so true.
Yes, you have to list to last. That is a quintessential saying amongst top producers. Why? Buyers never actually have to buy ever. I mean, sit on that thought for a second. They don't have to buy. A buyer could live with mom and dad, or maybe they are mom and dad and they could live with their kids. A relocating executive can live in executive housing or take a different job or not take the job, right?
Julie, do you realize that we have both of that happening? That's the reason I laughed. We have our kid living with us and my mom.
I know. And neither one of them have to buy.
No.
Anyway.
And neither one of them are motivated.
No, not at all. That's right. At least not to move. So that's the thing. Buyers don't have to buy. Now, you can have motivated buyers that are also qualified and you're setting appointments and they're going to buy with you. That's true. They still don't have to. And even so, they might not only be working with you too, right? They also might be looking at new construction this afternoon. So buyers, if you're lucky, will both buy with you and, actually close. That's one transaction. If you're lucky that they don't actually have to do, right? One transaction. Sellers, listings. And I was thinking as we were going through this outline, Tim, I was trying to think of do you know any of our previous coaching clients or colleagues or coaches who made more than $1 million in this business being buyer heavy? Have you ever known anybody that did that?
No,
I haven't
okay.
either. I don't think so.
Yes. Okay. But they bought their leads. They've been Zillow Premier agents. I actually know quite a few. I know quite a few that have been Zillow Premier agents that have built these big buyer agents teams. Let me finish. I'll explain. Okay. But the problem is that they're giving away all their profit. So the typical scenario would be is they're paying 40% to Zillow. And then some of them are paying $10,000 a month, a flat fee plus the 40%. So they were doing over $1 million a year in GCI, but their margins were just awful. In many cases, they weren't even making any money off the buyer side. So the net profit was essentially scratch. And so if you're a broker, or if you're a team and you're saying, well, I now have to basically make any money I'm going to be making out of my real estate practice from doing mortgages, it's because you need to retool what you're doing on the real estate side. Real estate is very, very profitable business based on proactive lead generation. Not profitable if you're buying all of your leads. So to answer your question, yes, Julie, I do know some that have done it, but I'll say I don't know anyone that has netted $1 million.
That would have been a better question.
$1 million, right? So I have known nobody that's netted $1 million. Some will claim that they have, but you do their numbers. You can just ask them their numbers and do it in your head. It's probably not true. If it's purely off buyer sides, very unlikely. But I do know loads. I don't even know how many, hundreds at the very least, of agents that net over $1 million a year from listings. That's definitely true. Yes.
That brings us full circle back to listings. And some of the teams that you talk about, and I should have asked from the net standpoint, that are doing that are many times subsidizing their income with, guess what, listings, right? So
in other words, what they're doing is and this is true, and we're going to go into you're going to get me on my soapbox here.
Sorry.
And I know you're not meaning to, is that when I have these conversations, so I'll have a big team or a brokerage or a teamerage, that's asking me about coaching and training, or maybe they're asking me about moving over to EXP with Julie and I, something like that. And it is very rare that I'm not having one of these conversations where they're having financial issues, just financial issues in that the buyer, let's say there's two sides of your practice. Let's say you're selling 500 houses a year and maybe 300 are buyer sides and the other 200 are coming from listings, let's just say. And you're buying all your buyer leads, you're a Zillow Flex agent, and you're paying referral fees on your seller side. Your seller side is still going to be more profitable, produce more net profit. But if you actually stop blending the numbers and look at those as two separate businesses, what you'll discover is, with virtually no exceptions, if your sale price is really high and high commission, then there's your exception, but that's not that common, is that the agents are using the profit from the listing side of the business. Remember, we split it to subsidize the buyer side. So in other words, the buyer side of the business doesn't produce enough net profit. It loses money. And so they have to move money, which would have been their profit, from the listing side of the business over to the buyer side of the business. Why? Because if you're going to be doing a lot of units, you're going to have a lot of support staff. You're going to have to be doing, nowadays buyer agents are demanding of all kinds of different things and all these things. That business model was viable really viable more than 15 years ago. Julie and I had a team. We had 7 buyer's agents. We had a listing specialist. We had 2 administrative staffs. We did all these things. But as the buyer's agents started demanding a higher commission split, and really what the problem was is when Zillow came online and they started essentially normalizing agents, recruiting agents to be part of your team or your brokerage by offering them leads. Anyone that's been in this business for a while, that is an absolute dead-end business model, because the agents will always tell you the lead quality isn't that great. And in their defense, it probably isn't, and you end up spending all of your money to try to feed these pissed off, angry birds all the time who are always complaining that there's not enough worms, and the worms you're giving them aren't any good. And what do? You are stuck wanting to add more, volume. So you're going to add more buyer agents. The next thing you know, you're feeding the buyer side of the business with what would have been your profit from the listing side. This is the perpetual loop that so many of these agents and brokerages are stuck in. And when I explain it to them, if they're not ready for the mission or for the lesson, I'd say for the awakening, I'll just put it that way. Sometimes they're feeling a little bit disappointed in themselves, or they're feeling a little embarrassed. That's not the way to feel or think about yourself. Because here's the deal. You probably, if I'm speaking to you right now and you're in that situation, you probably are an A player. You are probably a full straight on badass. But the problem is you're trying to make a B opportunity work. So you're an A player trying to make a B opportunity into an A opportunity. That's a mistake. That's an exercise in futility, because you're going to always be beating your head against the wall. Like, why can't I make this why can't I, make this thing into some phenomenal, big, huge, massively profitable thing? Well, I'm going to involve mortgage. I'm going to involve title. I'm going to start getting into home improvement. I'm going to do all these other things because the real estate business model that you've built is not profitable. And so now you're trying to make it profitable by ancillary service, thus increasing the time, thus increasing the liability. Here's the thing. The business model that you were pursuing was viable a long time ago, more than 10 years ago. And back then it was profitable because you could actually make good profit off your buyer sides before all the things and more that I just shared with you. But now you need to revise your thinking about real estate. You need to revise your thinking about what you're spending money on, and give yourself permission as an A player to start looking at or creating for yourself an A opportunity. It's super hard to do because you have to let go of what's not working. We've had to do that in our own businesses many times, because most good ideas don't work for very long. If you've got a good idea, lead generation wise, sales wise, something that makes you unique, something that gives you an advantage in the marketplace, you're lucky in this day and age if it works for 24 months. Lucky if it works for that long. Most times it's going to work for 4 to 6 months and then it's gone. Now, back in the day, you could actually have, like Julie and I were doing guaranteed home sales. We were doing all this stuff. We started in the 90s doing all this, and we were unique in the marketplace for at least a decade because very few people were copying us. And then over time, they all started to copy us. But the moral of the story, what I'm trying to share with all of you is that don't be beating up on yourself just because the big team model or the brokerage model that you're trying to create isn't working. It's time for us, you and me, to have a conversation about what you can be doing when you're involved with Julie and I at EXP. Let's have that conversation urgently, because I'll show you what might be the A opportunity that you, Mr. or Mrs. A player, have been searching for, and it'll blow your mind. So if you're that person, I want you to text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206. I love those phone calls, especially when people are receptive to the realization that their best days are still ahead of them. That makes me feel amazing. So let's have that call if that's you, 512-758-0206. And for the rest of you who are interested in joining with Julie and I at eXp Realty, click the link below to learn more about what we offer on top of what eXp already offers, and why literally thousands of agents are joining with us every year at eXp Realty. Anything you'd like to say to these guys before we wrap up for today, my dear?
Well, I think the summary of all of our points from today and yesterday is stop overcomplicating this business. There are, we can't deep dive like we do in coaching on this podcast, but we can expose you to the things that simplify this business. Yes, you have to have skills. Yes, you have to have presentations and know how to deliver them in such a way that you will win the business. Yes, you have to actually follow a schedule that has something to do with your goals. None of this is complicated. You do have to concentrate on being a listing agent more than being a buyer's agent, at least eventually. Now, some of you who have a few buyers because you just got licensed and they're your best friends, those are always your first deals. That's okay. That's normal. But for longevity in this business and to turn it into a money-making machine that you desire, you do have to concentrate on listings. You do have to have a great kick-ass pre-listing presentation. You do have to show what makes you different. And if you're going to be an ethical real estate professional because you're using the pre-listing package that we coach you to use in coaching, then you have to do the things that are in the pre-listing package. You have to deliver that and know how to do it. That's why we have coaching. That's why you can't do all of this just off of podcasts. I know that some of you, you write us great messages. I love the podcast. I got so much out of it. That's great. If you like the podcast, think about what you can do with coaching when we help you implement the ideas that you hear in coaching. My mom is fond of saying, if you get one idea from a book, you've done great. And I feel like that can happen on podcasts too, but you have to do something with it. So allow us to help you with that. Go ahead.
I am impressed that you actually did a little bit of a sales pitch there, Julie. You usually leave that for me.
Well, I mean, I am passionate about it and I love, excuse me, doing the podcast with you, but I get more excited when I see the results of them implementing these things, right? Because it's easy to listen to. I mean, I listen to tons of podcasts, so do you, and it's easy to go, that was a great podcast. I love that. It's the next step can be the harder step because you have to really embrace it and be accountable to it. And that's okay.
Well,
But
this
don't try and do
podcast,
it alone. Yeah.
our podcast is just a sifting and sorting, right?
Yes.
First of all, the people that listen in the first place are probably, they're definitely above average because they're not just looking for easy buttons. Otherwise, they wouldn't be attracted to doing what they don't want to do and they don't want to do it at the highest level. So then the next phase is, do they listen to it every day? Then the next phase is, do they listen to all the podcasts? And so the more you are on this path, and the more it's in alignment, because you're feeling in alignment finally with what your highest and truest purpose is, which is being of service to other people. That's what this podcast does. That's when a lot of people join coaching. That's when a lot of people join with this EXP. If they're at the, if they're frankly can afford it and they're looking for the greatest challenge, that's when they join with you as an elite coaching client. Those are our people. And I'll be honest with you, there aren't that many, honestly. Thousands. That's how many people are going to be willing to take their business and this opportunity seriously. And for those people, they make most of the money, really, at the end of the day.
True.
So you could start out with Premier Coaching, but you want to stay on that path and you want to climb your way to the top of the mountain because oddly enough, the higher you climb, the less competition you have and the easier it is to climb. That's just the truth because you have the experience from already gotten to the level that you are, and it becomes easier because you know where to put your feet, you know where to put your hands, you know what to expect. And yeah, that's what coaching and training, and that's what a long-term career success is all about. So listen, guys, make sure you're listening to the podcast every single day. Oh, a warning, a friendly warning. Tomorrow's Friday. You know what that means? It's it's crazy, wackadoo, whatever the heck we want to talk about.
Fun Friday.
Fun Friday. Julie calls it Fun Friday. And last week we talked about aliens. We talked about Loch Ness Monster maybe having a girlfriend. We talked about tariffs. We talked about all kinds of wacky things. And we've got a great show, a whole bunch of off the cuff, insane sounding, probably maybe even certifiably insane things for you.
Fair warning.
Fair warning. That's what I'm saying. All right. You guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you on the show tomorrow.